same. Share love. Embracing the differences like hand in glove. Spread peace and joy, it's a beautiful sight. Together we shine in each other's light. Together we stand in love's pure might. Watching the world in love and light. Hearts beating and peaceful flight. Colors of harmony, painting the night. Together we stand in love's pure might.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Watching the World. Yes, sharing love and light. I wrote that song, believe it or not. Maybe I should have been a songwriter. Well, life is short, so I'll stick to what I'm sticking to, folks. Have some quite intriguing news today. I have some bad news for myself. I'm flying to California tomorrow. I'll be there for a week. And the government shutdown has the airports looming with sadness and misery. So I dread tomorrow getting on the airplane, flying so far, having to deal with the shortest staff. Like, what does this mean? So can't change the trip, folks. So we'll see what happens. In fact, we're going to get into the government shutdown today. We're going to talk about it. But yesterday was quite exciting. I was on NBC yesterday. Also last night, did you catch me on Tasha K Live? We had quite an amazing show. So many people supported. We have so much support. We're quite thankful. We have so many people in the building already. Always the familiar names. Eric, a part of the team. JDP. Okay. Thank you. Sharon is in the building as well. And Bordeaux leading the way. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. But we have to get to it. We have to talk about it. And we have to understand how we can work together, come across the aisle, stop falling for the labels. Everybody wants to be put in some sort of box. I'm a Democrat. I'm a Republican. I guarantee you on your block, when the enemy comes, if that day does come, you won't be asking your neighbor, well, what party do you subscribe to before we fight together? What a ignorant idea. But this is the way of life here that we have in the country. Everybody wants to connect with the blue or the red, whether that's in politics or in the streets. But let's get to it. Let's find out. And again, we're going to get to the pointing of fingers because we're about to find out who is that masked man? Who's behind the shutdown? Let's see what CNN has to say. We're going to see what we're going to be over Fox, CNN, MSNBC. We try to be balanced here, so don't get your feathers flustered if you see a news broadcast that you do not like the media outlet. We're pretty versatile over here. But let's check it out, folks. Let's see what's happening in America. And this is potentially why we have this shutdown going on.
Bring in Arlette Saenz to join us. Arlette, what are the facts here and what are Democrats saying to this?
Well, really right now, what we are hearing from both Speaker Mike Johnson and Democratic leadership is them engaging in this messaging war over who is to blame for this current shutdown. What Republicans are arguing is that they believe that any negotiations about extending those expiring Obamacare subsidies, which is really central to Democrats' arguments and demands, that those discussions can't happen until the government is reopened. And as Speaker Johnson pointed out, they believe that this is an issue that can be handled a little bit later down the road. Those subsidies are set to expire on December 31st at the end of the year. So what Republicans
do you guys think that Obamacare was quite effective over the years? What do you think? And are you excited? Have you even taken the time to read about Trump RX? It has his name on it. Tell us what you think in the comments.
Like Speaker Johnson are arguing is Democrats need to reopen the government and allow the work to continue to negotiate for actual negotiations to begin about how to extend or possibly reform those enhanced Obamacare subsidies. But Democrats, meanwhile, are arguing that those conversations need to happen right now. And that is because Americans this very month will start to receive
My brother just called me. He said, "Hey, do you think the shutdown will go on all the way until December?" Tell us, what do you think? You think that this is going to continue for some extensive time, or it'll end soon?
Notice of how much their healthcare premiums are going to increase if those Obamacare subsidies are not extended. So they want to make sure that Americans are able to factor in what their healthcare will look like. Democrats want to see those extended permanently. Republicans, some have said that they want to see an extension. Some want some reforms to the program. But that's really at the heart of the debate right now, as both sides remain locked in with no negotiations in sight for how to end this shutdown.
All right, Arlette Saenz, thank you so much. I want to bring in our CNN chief data analyst, Harry Enton, to look at the polling and this blame game. I mean, you're hearing these messaging wars, right, Harry? Walk us through what the numbers are saying about who Americans are blaming right now.
Yeah, I just saw
Okay, so who do you guys blame? Do you dare tell us who you blame for the shutdown?
the speaker up there trying to place the blame on Democrats, but I got to be honest with you, you look at the polling data and they simply put not buying Speaker Johnson's arguments. What are we talking about? Well, why don't we just blame more for the 2025 shutdown? Normally, when you see Republican on the screen, that's a good thing because they're leading. But in this case, it's a bad thing because more Americans are blaming him for the shutdown. And you can see it's a sweep across the board. You look at the New
Okay, so according to the data, it's the Republicans that are leading the way for the shutdown.
York Times poll, blame Republicans more by 7 points. How about the CBS poll, came out yesterday? Blame Republicans more by 9 points. How about
Okay, thank you so much. Oh, we have Deborah in the house. Deborah says it's a bad time of the year to be without funds. Exactly, right? Heading into the Christmas season. Also, Old Driver says Republicans have both House and Senate. Okay, perhaps that's why they're taking the brunt of the blame.
the Marist University poll, blame Republicans more by 12 points. And then the Washington Post poll takes the cake, blaming Republicans more by 17 points. You average it all together, and we're talking about a double-digit margin in which more Americans are blaming the Republicans than the Democrats. Now, perhaps that shouldn't be so surprising to students of history. Why? Because we've had a number of shutdowns in the past. And which party almost always, or basically always, seems to get blamed? It's the Republican Party that always seems to get blamed, whether it's the 95-96 shutdowns, 2013, or the 2018.
So we're heading into midterm elections. Do you think this will have a negative effect on the Republican Party?
2019 shutdowns. And more importantly, what I think is so important is we are still at the beginning of this shutdown, right? What happens right now in the polling may not necessarily hold going forward. But historically speaking, what we've actually seen is that the party that gets blamed at the start of the shutdowns, 95, 96, 2013, 2018, 2019, is the same party that gets blamed by the end of the shutdown. So at this point, more Americans are blaming the Republicans than the Democrats. And historically speaking, those margins have tended to hold.
That's interesting. So how many Americans dislike both sides here? You show the Republican side that right now Americans are blaming Republicans, but overall, what about both sides?
Yeah, okay. So, we're talking, we saw the margins, right here where more folks are blaming Republicans than Democrats. But of course, what about people who don't like either side, right? What about this? So blame more for the shutdown. Look, you got Republicans at 39%, Democrats at 27%. But both sides equally, we're talking about a third of the American people, basically 30% on the average poll, who are blaming both sides equally. So this is not a case in which the American public is loving the arguments that Democrats are putting forward. It's more that they hate the Republicans more. And if given the choice, what we're really talking about is a majority of the, or a large portion of the American public who don't like really either side.
Okay, guys, so I'm with Deborah, definitely. This is the worst time of year to have a shutdown when people's money is affected going into the holidays. And as I said, I'm going to be flying this week. Imagine, did you hear about what's happening actually at the airports? It's quite dreary going into the airports tomorrow. We're going to take a look here also and talk about Ghislaine Maxwell, but I'm going to go into a few comments first. Ghislaine Maxwell might be getting a pardon from Donald Trump. Do you think it does good for optics, considering the background that Donald Trump's name is mentioned in the Epstein files? In fact, we've had quite a few, it seems ever since Charlie Kirk shooting, we've had so many distractions, right? But people still ask, especially in the comments, what's happening with the Epstein files. Let's get to a few comments. Shout out to you, Sharice. Thanks. NPC 137, Republicans don't respond to their dumbass polls anymore. Okay. Good morning to you, JDP. Dems wanted more money for illegals, plain and simple. That's from NPC. Okay, Sharice says she agrees. Shalice says, pardon? Oh, no. Yes, a pardon may be in the air. He also mentioned Sean Diddy Combs yesterday. Previously, Donald Trump had said Diddy did not ask for a pardon, but yesterday he said he did. So maybe that happened after the fact. But anyway, let's see what happens here with Ghislaine Maxwell.
Just desecrated that Sunday morning TV liturgy when he turned to politics. Donald Trump knows that the most important thing on commercial television is, of course, the commercial. The commercials are those immovable granite blocks that frame every television discussion. And Donald Trump knew that all he had to do to beat every Sunday morning TV interviewer at the game was to keep spewing nonsense until the so-called interview would crash into that immovable object, the TV commercial, and the interviewer would be out of time and the interviewer would lose once again. When Donald Trump became a presidential candidate, he quickly became the most valuable Sunday morning guest one of those shows could have, because the show that had Donald Trump that weekend would win the ratings race that weekend. And so the desperation to book Donald Trump knew no bounds. Donald Trump smelled that desperation and used it to become the first guest in the history of those shows to literally phone it in. Donald Trump became the first Sunday morning guest who didn't have to show up. We don't know if he was in pajamas when he was doing those phone interviews on the Sunday morning shows during his first presidential campaign, but we do know that we learned absolutely nothing from any one of those interviews, so-called interviews of Donald Trump. Every one of them was a failure, a complete failure. Not one moment in the Sunday morning interviews had the slightest impact on the presidential campaign. Donald Trump has become harder to get on Sunday morning, but the desperation remains and I guess deepens. And so yesterday morning, CNN presented a so-called interview with CNN that they can't even prove was Donald Trump. They called it breaking news. They called it, quote, an exclusive new interview with President Trump.
So we see how AI is affecting big media where they don't even know if these recordings are legitimate.
That's what they called it. Before the interviewer said this.
The president answered my questions on text about his hopes for this nascent deal.
What? You gave him the questions in writing? So now, instead of letting Trump hide in a phone call where we can at least know that it's him talking, Donald Trump gets to hide behind the black screen of texting? We actually have no idea who texted the replies in that so-called interview. CNN is
Benja says, laughing my butt off. So what's the fake news now, Mr. Trump? Christine, hey, thank you guys for all the likes, share, and subscriptions. I really do appreciate it. Christine says, I am his wife and I'm trying to talk calming Jim. Okay, Benja says, Trump runs things from his own social media platform. Y'all just figuring this out?
unable to prove that Donald Trump was actually doing that texting. CNN has not revealed how long it took to get a reply to each of the 5 written questions that apparently got replies from someone who texted those replies or someone who told Donald Trump what to text in those replies, or maybe it was from Donald Trump. The first question was, what happens if Hamas insists on staying in power in Gaza, to which the text reply, and we don't know how long this took, was, and we don't know who did it, the text reply says, complete obliteration. The final slow pitch softball question was, How do you think the government shutdown is going to end? That question got the empty answer it deserved. Someone texted this reply as an answer to that question of how the shutdown is going to end. Good, we are winning and cutting costs, big time, exclamation point. The interviewer then said, I asked a few other questions on text, still waiting for a response on those, Mr. President. Okay, what were those questions? Exactly which questions did Donald Trump refuse to answer? What could be more relevant in reporting an exchange?
So basically, CNN is reporting on text messages.
Than that is supposed to be with the President of the United States, than including the questions he refused to answer. We have no idea. Any questions about Jeffrey Epstein or his sex trafficking friend, Ghislaine Maxwell?
Freedom says, we in Israel, the chosen people, will own the world. We own Trump and Starmer, and we own the UK and the USA. Okay. All right.
Any questions about Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell? We don't know. We have no idea. We have no idea what the other questions were that Donald Trump refused to answer, or whoever was on the other end of that phone refused to answer. When the history of Donald Trump's mental decline is written, it will no doubt include that so-called interview yesterday as a turning point in Donald Trump's White House dealing with the challenge of Donald Trump trying to answer questions during this period of obvious mental decline for Donald Trump. Donald Trump was allowed to become, by CNN, the first president in history to get questions in writing for an interview.
So we can see the scene of the world is changing dramatically, right? Even with the media.
Questions that he could take home, as it were, since he was at home. Questions from a reporter. And then Donald Trump was allowed to take, we don't know how much time to reply to those questions. We do know CNN is still waiting for some of them.
Okay, so we're rather tight on time. We're going to keep moving, but apparently Ghislaine Maxwell is up for pardoning. What do you guys think? Do you think it should really happen? This is a quite intriguing story here as to what Donald Trump will do in regards to Hamas. And he issued them a bold warning that we just kind of heard about. But let's get into it further.
Another Fox News alert. Right now, negotiators in Egypt are going at it. They're getting set for peace talks between Israel and Hamas. And President Trump urges all parties to move fast or bloodshed could ensue.
Steve Harrigan is live in Tel Aviv, Israel, with the latest. Good morning, Steve.
Morning, Lauren.
I think Hamas is in hot water. You know, I think they put up a deal that they know what the outcome is likely. They have the best people in the world, so they know pretty much how this thing is going to turn. But how can you put up a deal for Hamas, right? And you let the prime minister of Israel sit there leading the way of the discussion. So you have two enemies. Imagine you have a conflict with your neighbor. The police come and they say, listen, I'm going to try to make peace between you guys to stop throwing rocks. But then your neighbor, who you hate the most, he gets to set the terms, right? It's almost like you're set up for failure. I've seen it my entire life.
President Trump is really putting the pressure on all sides in these negotiations, telling them all that the release.
Shalice says should not happen. Okay, very good. Thank you, guys. AI is in the building. Thank you for your continued support. Says under the cover, mass distraction and mass overreaction. Maxwell was finna, slide out of the country. Okay, Bert says he said that same thing about Michael Flynn and Paul Manafort and Roger Stone, clemency, presidential pardon. He said something about those pardons too. Okay, all right. So we'll see what happens. Cherie says, yes, I am Perry right now on America. Okay, very good.
So the hostages could come within days, but that speed is of the essence.
The countries of the world, a lot of the countries surrounding Israel, frankly, Muslim, Arab, and many others have had great meetings with Hamas, and it looks like it's working. So we'll wait for a little while, see how it all turns out.
Will the administration end fire?
Very, very quickly. I think it's going to go very quickly. The meetings seem to be very good. We'll find out. We'll let you know soon.
A real caution, too, from Secretary of State Marco Rubio about the work that could remain ahead in phase 2, particularly if Hamas does not decide to disarm, that the real challenges could come even after the hostages are released.
The second part of this, and it's going to be a much tougher part of it, is what happens after that? Who's going to run Gaza moving forward? It can't be Hamas. It can't be a terrorist organization. And the demobilization of terrorism in Gaza is the end goal here in terms of ensuring that this never happens again. That whole place has to be rebuilt. That's not going to happen in 72 hours or 6 weeks. I mean, that's going to take some time. But
Sounds like a nightmare. Raven says Trump is no longer trustworthy and has been unpredictable from the start. In the end, he played a dirty game one way or another, especially when it comes to Ukraine war. All right, Sid says Netanyahu is POTUS, President of the United States. Thank you, Sid. And thank you guys for the likes, the shares, and the subscriptions.
this is the closest we have been. This is the most progress we have seen.
It could look like Hamas releasing 48 hostages, alive and dead. On the other side, Israel releasing up to 250 Palestinians who are now serving life sentences, as well as hundreds who have been detained in Gaza over the past 2 years of war. Guys, back to you.
All right. Thanks so much. Steve has seen it all, too. So it's been coming up on October 7th, 2 years since the big attack.
Tomorrow.
So they had the exchange. We were just talking about this on Axios. Evidently, the president called up Bibi and said, this is great news. He's like, not really.
I didn't realize it was 2 years since that first attack, October 7th.
Hamas, I can't trust them. They always break down. And he said, can't you be more be optimistic?
Don't be negative.
Yeah, don't be so negative. I understand what both sides are saying. You know, the president's like, we have to think big. We got to think about there's no alternative. And he's saying, do you know who you're dealing with? Because they got to put down their guns and they got to rescind all rights.
Why do you guys think that everyone's saying now that Israel controls America, right? Why is that the case?
Or to run Gaza or West Bank or the Palestinian Authority. And they said, we want to keep, Hamas says, we want to keep our guns, but we'll put our rockets in storage. That's what.
Well, the president is balancing the regional piece because he's dealing with the Arab and Muslim world and trying to keep them in line with this deal. Getting them to agree to this deal is, I mean, that is unheard of, to get the full Muslim world and Arab world to agree to that. But to Bibi's point, the prime minister of Israel, Hamas has shown no indication that they want to surrender.
Yeah. Well,
okay, Sid says Fox News is owned by a Jew. Why would you ever think it will be unbiased? I'm not making that claim, but we do cover all the stations. David Sterno says Fox News lies. Okay, David also says if Trump's news, he runs it. Okay, Sharice loves it. JDP says like, share, and subscribe, and turn on your notifications to be notified of upcoming shows.
Kushner is in Egypt. Steve Witkoff is there. Hopefully they can negotiate some sort of a deal. When Rubio was asked over the weekend who's going to run Gaza, because it can't be Hamas, and he said it can't be Hamas.
Remember, Donald Trump says they're going to turn Gaza into the beautiful waterfront properties, perhaps some casinos and some Trump towers, right?
He said it's going to take some time to iron all that out, to set up a group that would govern. He said it'll take time. But he said the negotiations between Hamas and Israel are not yet the end of the war.
You know what? This is, all I can tell you is this. Just keep this in mind. I don't know what's going to happen next. But at a time in which Israel is isolated, the president of the United States is popular in the Arab world, and he's the most popular politician, bar none, in Israel. Think about that. How has he done it? How has he been able to get the Arab world and Israel?
You guys, whether you like Donald Trump or not, you must admit that we have never seen in our lifetimes anyone quite like him with such influence. And I make a good point, whether you like him or not. Lee Edwards says the Saudis own 22% of the Fox News. Okay, thank you for your contribution. Larry Wilbank says Hamas is evil and should be removed from power. Free Palestine from Hamas. Okay. What about the effects of Israel too? Tell us what you think. Shalice says, so sad what they're doing to them. Yes, indeed.
Israel, who are at odds together in order to pressure Hamas, even though obviously There's been friction for thousands of years. At this moment, even Andrea Mitchell over the weekend said, I would give him the Nobel Peace Prize if he can pull this off.
Do you think the Middle Eastern countries are eager to change their reputations? And that's why he had, remember when he went over to the Middle East?
I'm going to say something really naive. I think the majority of these governments want to build their economies.
100%.
And I think that Saudi Arabia is changing the curriculum in a whole generation. And I know how angry everyone is, and I get the 9/11 families, but something's changing. And just be open to it. Not saying that all terror is gone, not saying that for a million years, but I do think that they want to start making their people's lives better. And the president working on economic deals gives me hope.
Well, there was, what, 7 or 8 Middle Eastern countries that supported this.
Including Indonesia.
Yeah,
I mean,
the 20-point plan.
Okay, very good. We're going to also look at, this is an important video. Patricia Heaton is going to break down how in recent time, people are starting to soften up and take the side of Hamas over Israel.
We're going to see a 9/11 again in this country if people don't wake up and take a stand and have their voice be heard. Hi, I'm Patricia Heaton. I'm an actress, a producer, and I'm the founder of the October 7th Coalition, or O7C, as we call it. It's a group to help activate Christians to be visibly and vocally supportive of the Jewish people, of Israel's right to exist, and to fight anti-Semitism along with all our Jewish friends.
Hello, I'm Brooke Goldstein. I am the founder and executive director of the Lawfare Project, as well as the founder of the NJU.
They're starting to get worried because people are starting to see all these babies and young people getting killed, and they're changing their position. Stay tuned.
Hatred movement.
I mean, one of the reasons I created the October 7th Coalition with my partner, Elizabeth, is that after October 7th, I assumed that all of America, and particularly Christians, would be standing up for Israel, that there would be a massive outcry on October 8th and 9th and 10th in support of Israel and condemning what had happened. And instead, there was sort of silence from most Americans and a lot of churches, and huge support for Palestine and for Hamas and for Gazans who went in and participated in this slaughter. And I was so taken aback, and I thought, how did we get to this place? And so I think
I can tell you how you got to that place, because people see what was happening in Palestine with the young kids. What happened was, and I'm going to tell you, these young people were being slaughtered, and the videos were making their way to TikTok. Now, keep in mind how TikTok was demanded to be sold, right? Well, research who's purchased or who's in the process of closing the deal with TikTok, right? And you're going to see a whole lot of reconstructing with that. Let's get through a few. I saw some great comments. Shalice says, Bobo, Nutmeg, Netanyahu, basically, must be stopped by any means necessary. This is starting to affect this type of mentality. People are starting to wake up in regards to Israel, whichever way you want to take that. Kevin says the middle ear pushing for a two-state. Okay, Middle East. Okay, Bert says, good point. People will not trust that because of 9/11. No trust. Exactly. People are still trying to figure out who's behind 9/11. And now they're starting to say, guess who was behind 9/11? Whether that could be true or not, when you look at social media and the control, a lot of people are giving up on the big media, and they're starting to tune in to YouTube channels and social media for their news, which could be dangerous. We know that, right? AI says James Vincent, correct. Okay. Cherie says, all about the money. It's all about the Benjamin's people. Bert says, be back. Okay. Thank you, Bert, for being here. Thanks for the like, share, and subscriptions. Murray says the killing of children in Gaza is so disgusting. They were also starving, right? Right. That's something to think about. Cherie says Trump is all about the money.
even just aside from religion, just as a human being, just as someone who has a moral foundation and in right and wrong and can see evil when it's happening in front of your face, I feel like it's not that special to speak up. It shouldn't be that special. This is a horrible thing that we witnessed, and now the whole world is supporting the perpetrator.
Let me give you a case in point. Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson were really supportive of Israel, but then as Christians, what they profess to be, once they start to see what was happening with Palestine and so forth, they changed their position. So there's an example of what she's talking about and why she's concerned about Israel.
Americans are starting to wake up and understand that radicalization, especially theologically motivated radicalization, is a threat to the United States, and why it has taken us so long after 9/11, when Islamist radicals flew planes and killed thousands of civilians, to wake up and realize this is not just about the Jews. The Jews are, so to speak, the canary in the coal miner's tunnel. But what happened after 9/11 was an orchestrated campaign of what I call Islamophobomania, that any counterterrorism expert or any member of the media or any author or any cartoonist who started speaking about or even parroting the threat of radical Islam was targeted as Islamophobic, was called racist, was called anti-Muslim. Well, we have woken up.
Okay, Kevin says the Middle East is pushing for a two-state solution because they don't want to deal with the Palestinians and want Israel to have two. Okay, AI says the biggest question is, are the Palestinians viewed by the so-called Arab Muslim world as authentic Arabs or just Muslims? Okay, thank you.
Now it is post October the 7th. It's taken way too long, but Americans are waking up that this is a threat to us.
I think because of the size of our country, it's hard for people to imagine anything like October 7th happening here. But we went through it, as Brooke said, with 9/11. And it's been forgotten. That's been.
Okay, so right there you see the memorial there. I covered it. We were there the other day doing some filming. I'm going to release the video to show you the memorial for that. Let's get back to it here. So now we're going to take a look at this whole prescription drug Trump RX plan, try to get an idea what's happening here.
Democratic leaders stand their ground, demanding Republicans tie the extension of Affordable Care Act subsidies to their short-term spending bill or risk a government shutdown. President Trump calls their demands unserious and ridiculous, but Democrats say it's actually crucial.
Because of the Republican refusal to address the Affordable Care Act tax credit issue, at least 20 million Americans are about to experience dramatic increases in their health care premiums,
you guys hear that?
co-pays, and deductibles.
And joining me now, former Secretary of Health and Human Services under President Obama, Kathleen Sebelius. She was instrumental in getting the Affordable Care Act into law. I welcome you. Thank you so much for being here. I want to get to some stats here because the nonpartisan KFF research group says healthcare costs could increase as much as 75% if these enhanced tax credits are allowed to expire at the end of the year. So who is most at risk if Democrats are unsuccessful and indeed the cost of ACA marketplace coverage goes up?
Well, Alex, the portion of the population in the marketplace are entrepreneurs, folks who run their own small businesses, people who are in the workforce but don't have a large employer paying a share of their healthcare costs. The government helps with tax credits, individuals to buy their own health insurance. We think it's a good idea, at least we did when President Obama was in office and President Biden. Think it's a good idea for everybody to be able to have affordable health insurance, be able to pay their bills, access a doctor, have preventive care. So you have 22 million people.
Okay, Deborah says she was a Kansas senator many years ago. Thank you, Deborah. Daniel Price, welcome back, says, yes, Palestinians are recognized by other members of the Arab world. Yes, they are. Arab, Semitic doesn't mean just Jewish people. Arabs are also Semites, and Jenny Chucky wasn't a Christian. Okay, Robert says, kick rocks liberal. All right.
People now in marketplaces, if these tax credits expire, folks who are in the marketplace will suddenly see their insurance costs skyrocket. And unfortunately, what's going to happen very quickly is young and healthy people will drop out. They won't be able to afford it, and they think, you know, I don't really need health care, which means that in most places you will have, again, what is called a high-risk pool. Older and sicker people will stay in the marketplace because they're desperate for insurance coverage, and costs will continue to escalate, and people will be sicker and not be able to be productive workers.
And so to that end, House Minority Leader Jeffries calls this a Republican healthcare crisis. Is that an accurate description of what's going on here?
Well, I think it's a very accurate description. This deadline for expiration of the tax credits has been on the books for a while. Democrats have over and over again tried to attach it to budget bills, tried to attach it to, you know, unfortunately, this Congress run by the Republicans has not passed many budget bills, but it has come up as independent legislation, but the Republicans have refused over and over and over again. So people will see their health insurance costs, which are already high, dramatically skyrocket.
So the Republicans have the Senate and the House, and they're still having trouble.
As KFF says, it could be 50, it could be 75%. Lots of folks are going to look at that bill, which will come up immediately over the holiday season, look at that bill and say, we just won't buy coverage for next year. We're going to take our chances and drop out, which is a very scary position for parents to be in, for workers to be in. Yeah. And only folks who are consider themselves pretty healthy are willing to take that risk.
Yeah, it's a heck of a gamble. So critics will say that the expanded tax credits are actually helping wealthier Americans who don't need assistance, and there are increased cases of fraud. Have the subsidies at all gone too far? Are they in need of any kind of reform?
Well, first of all, I haven't ever seen any evidence of fraud. Let's start there. That's, you know, thrown against the wall with everything that the Republicans want to cancel. It's always fraud or waste or abuse. No evidence to back that up. Secondly, I think if you think about someone who works for Ford Motor Company, everyone, regardless of income level, gets help from the company to purchase their health insurance. That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about wealthy people. We're talking about people who are buying health insurance on their own for themselves and their families. People are supporting their workers, a few workers in the workplace. And the government, again, is trying to step in the role of a large employer and pay a portion of that cost. So I think to suggest that somehow this is only wealthy people, it's just people don't understand.
Wow, she's making some solid points, folks. Let's go back and look at a few of the comments. I see a lot of people participating. Thank you very much. So we're going to go back here. Daniel says, in fact, people like Kirk who claim to be Christian aren't Christ-like at all. And the worst kinds of representations of the word of Jesus, anyone who espouses that as a Christ-like is shameful. Okay, Heather Black says, you're fired, you're fired. They hired that reality TV star wannabe celebrity to run this country. Talking about Donald Trump. Courtney says, illegals aren't our problems. Okay, Welp says, the Affordable Care Act destroyed health care in the U.S. It makes no sense. The cost goes up because of the illegals got kicked off. We had affordable health insurance before Obama. Okay. Daniel says, no to you, Welp. You didn't. In fact, the majority of the Americans couldn't afford insurance on their own and had to try to find an employer who benefits, but still had no copay. Sharice says, good video, and I love it. Thank you, Sharice. Thank you for the support, the likes, the shares, the subscription. Daniel says, illegals aren't our problem. The inscription of the Statue of Liberty says otherwise. Oh, yeah. So did the Jesus dude. Okay. All right. Sabati says, hi, new podcast. Thank you. Hopefully you subscribe. James says, yeah, it's called democracy. Michonne is in the building, holding it down. She says, welcome in and thank you for joining. Did you remember to like, share, and subscribe and support the channel? Heather Black says it's calling itself a democracy, but that's not what it is. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. Marilyn says, FDJT and anyone who supports the traitor. The only minorities hurting this country is the billionaires. Okay. AI says the VIX, the index, is rising higher today. Thank you for that insight.
The income levels of folks who are able to qualify for these subsidies. And again, they're not in a workplace where an employer is picking up the cost, is picking up a large share of the workers and the dependents' income. These are folks who are on their own, entrepreneurs, small business owners, owners of diners, military, young families who have retired who don't qualify yet for TRICARE, all kinds of people who are out there purchasing
Tell us in the comment, how do you get your health care? Are you worried about this?
health insurance on their own. And what we saw with increased subsidies, Alex, is that suddenly lots of younger, healthier people bought insurance, came into the market, which is good for everybody. The overall deal is, though, costs don't go down. So if these folks drop out, they suddenly become uninsured customers for the local hospital. When somebody breaks their arm, they still come in and get care. Their doctor.
Okay, so we get the general idea here. We're going to keep moving due to time, but very important information. Did you hear the story about the woman who set another church on fire, tried to take out the pastor? Second week in a row, we hear about this type of behavior.
The fire that destroyed a Cobb County church. Police say the woman who set the fire is now charged with arson and other offenses. The church pastor says that woman made threats to him and the church. Channel 2's Audrey Washington is live now in Austell. Audrey, the pastor believes that woman was not well.
Right. He actually told me that only a demon would burn down a church like this. Right now, we are actually standing behind the tape here. But when my photographer Dana pushes in, you can really see how the fire gutted the church. The roof is gone. The newly renovated office space, burnt rubble.
You have to be possessed by a demon to do something like that.
Pastor Raphael Grant says only evil would move a person to pour gasoline inside of a church and then set it on fire. But that's exactly what police said this woman, Aries Jordan, did on Monday night.
You cannot be a logical, rational human being to do that.
We flew News Chopper 2 over Prayer City Eagles Chapel International Ministries in Austell. You can see how the flames ripped through the church and left it a charred mess.
We were not expecting this, but we had some signs.
Members, along with the pastor, say they were not surprised by the arrest. They tell us Jordan, who once came to the church to be, quote, delivered, threatened to burn down the church in the past. They showed us these text messages.
She made mention that she was going to burn down the church.
Pastor Grant says he reported the threats to the police.
We took it to court and everything. Yes. She was arrested and released.
According to the warrant, Jordan faces a slew of charges, including arson, criminal damage, and terroristic threats. Right now, Pastor Grant says he's focused on rebuilding. The church started the GoFundMe campaign.
The place is completely gone, and so we have to build.
Maybe the church did not have insurance because they started a GoFundMe, or maybe they just did it. Okay, interesting. Okay, we're going to keep moving, guys. Also, I hate to keep bringing the bad news, but there was a mass shooting last night. A lot of people didn't hear about it. That's why I want to bring it to you so you are aware. And I told you last week, when you're in public, don't be buried into your cell phone. Pay attention because you don't know what people are thinking.
I just heard a ton of shots. I mean, people started running inside of Paradigm, even in the office where I was. I can't even count how many shots it was, but it was quite a few people running.
This was last night, folks. Pay attention.
I mean, unfortunately, people laid out on the sidewalk. People trying to resuscitate.
Breaking first at 5, chaos in Alabama's capital city. 2 people are dead and 12 others are injured after a mass shooting just before midnight last night in Montgomery. Good evening. I'm Megan Scarano. It was a violent weekend across Alabama, from Montgomery to Tuscaloosa to Pelham. We start first with the mass shooting overnight in Montgomery. A 17-year-old boy and a 43-year-old woman are now dead after a shootout between two groups. This happened about a mile from Alabama's state capitol. 5 victims have life-threatening injuries. The youngest victim was just 16 years old. Police believe one person was targeted before.
So last night you could have went grocery shopping on your way to church, maybe picking up pizza for the family, and then you get shot. Run into all of this rapid fire. It's crazy.
Before gunfire was exchanged, then several other people in the crowd pulled out their guns and started firing shots. The motive is still unclear in this investigation.
My personal opinion is this was very, very much preventable because individuals who pulled the trigger are responsible for this. They carried those weapons into this crowd. And at any time, they could have walked away from this or walked away from whatever was happening, but they did not. And a bullet, once fired, does not come back.
Police say several weapons have been recovered. Montgomery Mayor Stephen Reed says this kind of violence is unacceptable.
Well, the National Guard don't sound so bad when you hear this type of activity just in a small town, perhaps everyday life.
Stupid people do stupid stuff that costs people's lives. We're not going to keep doing that. If they're reckless and they're dangerous, they don't need to be on the streets. They need to be somewhere where it doesn't matter what they do, what they think about themselves, because they should not have that impact on others. And so whatever that cost is, so be it.
Crime Stoppers Mayor Reed and Montgomery City Council President are now offering a combined $50,000 reward for any information.
Okay, is there anyone in the audience from Montgomery, Alabama? If so, be careful tonight too. All right, so we're gonna conclude by checking out Bondi's interview before Congress. We're gonna get into that a little bit. I'm going to go through a few of the comments before we close out with this. It's very important to pay attention to Bondi because she's making a lot of moves right now. Deborah says, deep breath. Yes, indeed. Sid says, absolutely a demon. Grumble says, do you think it was a liberal or what? Hard to tell. We don't know. Sharon says, my goodness. Okay, yes, everybody's quite astonished by what's happening. John 1:4 says only demons hate Christ. Okay, we have some pastoring in the comment section. David Price is going heavy. Daniel is always here. Daniel says, go read the Bible, John. Jesus didn't say a darn thing about the need for churches as physical structures. Churches were the assembly of people who behaved in a Christ-like way, not a tax shelter. Okay, good point. Thank you, Daniel, for breaking it down for us. JDP says, like, share, and subscribe, and turn on your notifications to be notified of upcoming shows. Tomorrow will be our News at Noon as well. From Thursday until Tuesday, we will be traveling California, bringing you news, but we'll also show you a lot of historic sites in California. All right, can't wait. Unfortunately, due to the government shutdown, we have to wade the waters, right? Trying to get over there. All right, Daniel says, also, while you're entitled to your freedom of religion, Jesus was invented by the Romans as a control mechanism. Did you hear what Daniel said? He says, Jesus was manufactured by the Romans. In fact, I was in Rome in August, and I had quite the time going to Greece again this upcoming year. And actually, I'm in a Bible scholarship program, and Daniel's actually teaching some pretty interesting things that I study every day. So, yeah, that's what my passion is, other than news. Tim Wiggins says, better send in the troops. I think so. They might send in the National Guard. Okay, John 1:4 says Christ went to temple. Okay, the temple in Jerusalem. There's a Bible account about that. Deborah says, coming at such a rate. Okay, thank you, Deborah. I said your name. AI says small towns are the most violent by ratio. Yes, indeed. I'm not far from Newburgh, New York, and they have the highest crime ratio for the state, one of the highest, right? Daniel says, okay, pagans went to the temples too, so what? In fact, the Catholics, the first branch of the Christian church, secretly had pagan temples underneath churches. Paganism and polytheism had temples. Okay, they're going back and forth. William, thank you for your support. Gang activity and terrorist activities probably would have been worse of a couple other people who were not armed. Okay, Cherie says, sad. Trigger says, everything bad that happens, everyone wants to say it's a liberal. Yes, that's the way of the world. Daniel says, Constantine was a Christian to the public by practicing pagan rites in secret and underground temples. Okay. A lot of people say Constantine converted on his deathbed. I could really break that down for you, but that's not what this channel is about. But this is what I talk to people about, the Gospels, and also not only that, but tying in history and so forth as well. Cherie says, thank you. AI says, small towns have been the most fatal overdoses, suicides, according to insurance. Okay, thank you for the insight. John 1:4 says, Christ, the word is God. Sid says, there is no J letter in Aramaic or Yiddish. Okay, we have quite the discussion. And one more from Daniel before we close out says, no, John, Christ is a Greek word from Christos. In fact, in Greek, the name Jesus Christ together doesn't make sense. Plus, Jesus and his disciples would have spoken Aramaic and been illiterate to the Greek. But we can tell you that the scriptures were written in the Greek. So we have to wonder why is that the case. Thank you, Daniel. I could elaborate on that. But again, this is a news show. I wish I could, man. I could go there with you. Okay. Pal Cadeau says, man, you got a whole lot of bright lights in here. Okay. Very good. So let's check out what's happening with Bondi. I'm going to read AI's comment. It says, no, J in Hebrew alphabet is better in English. Was not invented until the late 16th century. The original King James did not use J. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Let's check out what's happening with Bondi.
What a Republican appointed judge only gave that person 8 years, there would be riots on the streets. Cities would be burning right now. So let's just call it out. We need the cleansing here. Let's just be truthful about what's happening. This left-wing political alliance violence is not a both sides thing. It's not. And so, Attorney General, I do want to ask you a couple questions about that because I feel like we have got to get a handle on this. Despite the overwhelming evidence that the political violence threat right now comes primarily from the left, the media just won't do it. They won't go along with it. They cite a few ridiculous studies to say that right-wing political violence is the main problem. For example, one of those studies was written by an Antifa-affiliated professor, and others count classes on prison gang.
This is Pam Bondi. This is live. She's before Congress.
Gang violence as right-wing political violence, but refused to count anything from the 2020 Summer of Love. Antifa attacks, like the ones that set off the explosive outside Michael Knowles' campus speech. We need good data. We need good data here. Will you commit to having the Department of Justice and the FBI research and release a public report on left-wing political violence?
Yes, Senator Schmidt.
Thank you. I also want to, after Antifa has laid siege on federal buildings and officers in Portland during the 2020 riots, your predecessor, Merrick Garland, dropped virtually all the cases against these defendants. You recently issued a new charging memo instructing federal prosecutors to aggressively pursue Antifa and other radical leftists wreaking havoc on our cities. What can you do to ensure that the various U.S. attorneys' offices follow through on your instructions?
Hopefully we will have our U.S. attorneys confirmed soon. They've been held up. Now our government is in a shutdown. Yet our prosecutors are still working. Getting all of our U.S. attorneys confirmed would be a huge step forward, Senator Schmidt. But yes, our attorneys throughout this country will be focusing on that.
And I want to thank you too. So I talked to you during your confirmation hearing and also with Kash Patel. of sort of, you talked about your two pillars, which is to end the weaponization and to get back to actually crime fighting. God bless. Like, that is something that the American people support, despite what you hear from the other side of the dais today. And in those conversations, we talked about you and Kash Patel getting field agents out in the field and doing the work of law enforcement. I said, I've got just the place for you, St. Louis. And St. Louis has now received the largest per capita infusion of permanent FBI agents anywhere in the country, and they're working hand in hand with local law enforcement. That's what happens when you have state leaders work with federal partners to crack down on something I hope we could all agree is a scourge for our communities, which is violent crime. But that is not, J.B. Pritzker, I guess he wants his moment. These Portland people want their moment of defying Trump. It's crazy to me. We should all be unified in this effort of making sure our laws are enforced and taking on violent crime. But I will say, in closing with this, because you referenced the shutdown, it's the same motivation. The same thing that motivates J.B. Pritzker to stand in front of the podium and defy Trump is the same motivation I hear from my Democrat colleagues now in this shutdown. It's not about anything other than the fact, and this is a clean CR. This is what they have lectured us on making sure we do 13 times in the last 4 years. This is about appeasing an increasingly radical base to prove that they're willing to stand up to President Trump. And I don't know how we get through all this unless there's a real reckoning on the other side about that reality. But in the meantime, I'm glad you're doing what your job is, which is to be the chief law enforcement officer of this country, focusing on violent crime and keeping our communities safe.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Schmidt. And despite what they're saying on the other side of the aisle, our agents are out there working tirelessly every day to make America safe. And that was Donald Trump's directive, and we will make it happen.
Thank you, Senator Schmidt. Senator Welch.
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney General Bondi. I have noticed that at various times when one of my colleagues is pressing you, you come up with something in their background. So I'll be waiting for my turn, but you don't have to do it right now. So let me get to my questions. One of the things that you mentioned, and I agree with this, that it's really tough on the various federal workforce, including our law enforcement folks, who are not getting paid because of the shutdown. Mm-hmm. I agree with that. But I also think that wasn't the whole story. There is an issue here that's going to affect Americans, whether they voted for President Trump or voted for Vice President Harris, and that is the loss of health care, where on November 1st, everyone who is getting Affordable Care Act help to buy insurance is going to get the notice of premium increases. And I got a letter just today from a Vermont family, nuclear family of 5, husband and wife, 54 and 55, with 3 kids, one of whom has acute myeloid leukemia. And the apprehension that they have is that if we don't solve this problem, and November 1 is a urgent date, then their family premiums will triple.
Okay, very good. So we're down to the wire here, folks. I'm going to go through some of the comments before we close out. Driver Not, shout out to you. Always good to see you. Thomas says, what the hell is that guy smoking? Okay. Go Up says, buddy, you are barely literate. Okay, that's toward Buddy. All right, Mashona says, we want to hear from you. We just ask that you be respectful of each other, watch your language, and be respectful of the YouTube policies. Thank you. John 1:4 says, Yeshua, meaning Jesus the Nazarene. Drabanat says, hello. Okay, Daniel. Okay, Deborah's in the building. Daniel says, I tried Sid. Sid said, Daniel, you are well educated. Okay, very good. Go Up says, yes, you're so good at reading your fairy tales, laughing my butt off. Okay, Daniel says, like I said, John, go look up how common of a name Yeshua was in the Hellenistic world. That's very common, Daniel. I'm with you 100%. Mashona says, the views and opinions expressed in the chat are that of the person expressing them and do not reflect the views of the host. Welcome in and thank you for joining. Daniel says, to Go Up, the hell you babbling about? I was using the Bible to debunk Christians who think it's a history book. He's saying it's not a history book. Go Up says, that's your community. Okay, very good. Moon Dream says, lie, deny, deflect, repeat. That's the vicious cycle, folks, the vicious cycle. John 1:4 says, how common was Yeshua of Nazarene? Okay, thank you. Storm 1163 says, Democrats closing the government is like a gift to Republicans. It makes no sense. The Republicans wanted smaller government our whole lives. Now they get to trim the fat to operate the government. Okay, Sid, thanks for being here. Nice to have you. John 1:4 says, great show. Okay, thank you. And also, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. All right, folks, thank you. We appreciate each and everyone for expressing your views. Today was pretty peaceful. I did not see too much name calling. Thank you for all of the moderators such as Eric, Mashona, Bordeaux, JDP, Deborah, so many for really coming forward and helping us keep everybody together. We will see you again tomorrow at noon to further discuss the hot topics when it comes to the news. You could also go back to Tasha K Live and see the big interview last night. We had a lot of people on. It was very good when it comes to Sean Diddy Combs finding out what was true, what wasn't true in regards to the rumors that you hear. So many people. This is probably one of the first cases that we had so many YouTubers and, just fly-by-night type of media coverage, but it all made for an event. But sometimes it's hard to navigate the truth to find out what's real and what's fake. It's just like with Donald Trump. A lot of things we hear, we do not know if it's real or it's fake, folks. But thank you for tuning in. We will catch you tomorrow at noon. Have a blessed day.
Different voices, but the same song. Building a world where we all belong. Kindness leading the way, breaking the chains. In the symphony of love, the thing remains. Embracing diversity, brighter days in sight. Watching the world sharing love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. Colors of harmony, painting the night. United we stand in love's pure might. Harmony, painting the night. United we stand.